أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الإمام المهدي وسلم تسليما السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My dear companions, Ali Reza and Timur.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
So let's have a conversation about what's taking place in the world. I think people are emotional about it.
Yes.
People are sad. People are mourning, actually, the fall or the collapse of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Muslims are in a state of shock, and they're very emotional at the moment. I think Sunni and Shia alike, because of many different reasons. I think for the Sunnis or the general Muslims, they saw in Iran like it was like the final group of Muslims that were, even if they disagreed with them in terms of aqidah or belief, they saw them as like the final point of resistance. You know, they liked Hassan Nasrallah. They were anti-Jew. They're anti-Israeli for the most part. The Arabs in the region, the Muslims, they hate Israel. They hate America.
Yeah.
You know, and so these are the guys that were kind of keeping them in check. These are like the guys that were preserving some final like Muslim pride or Arab pride, you know, and the fact that they were squashed so easily and in such a like a humiliating way, you know, from what took place in Gaza to what took place in Lebanon to what took place in Syria to what took place in Iran, like it's very humiliating. It's very embarrassing, actually, on the world stage in front of the entire world. Like it's so bad, actually. You know how bad it is? It's so bad that for 4 years, Ukraine is able to kind of fend itself off and for the most part, like still remain intact against Russia, a superpower that size, that has nuclear weapons. And these guys have all fallen, all these countries, all these Muslim countries, Lebanon, Syria, you know, Palestine. And all the other countries are just sitting there watching.
Yeah, within just a few, within a moment, 1 second they're alive, and the next second they're gone.
The next second they're gone. And so there are people that have expressed, you know, I've seen them online and I've talked to some of them, people that have expressed that, you know, the Muslims are mourning right now. They're sad. They feel depressed about what's taking place because they witnessed before the rise of the Islamic Republic, the so-called Islamic Republic, and now they're witnessing its collapse. And they had so much dreams and hopes and ambitions, you know, that they were hoping would be fulfilled by this Islamic Republic, and now they're in a state of becoming disillusioned, especially the Shia, the Muslims in general, but especially the Shia. And the reason for is because they were hoodwinked, they were deceived. They were tricked. They had a spell that was cast over them, a great deception that I don't even think the West understands, to be honest with you. Like, I don't even think that the CIA and the Mossad even understand how deep the deception was and the dimensions of this incredible story that's taken place in Iran with the rise and collapse of the Islamic Empire. But let's go through it, shall we?
Yes.
Basically, you have, a long time ago, you have the Iranians. They're being colonized by the West. Their oil is being stolen. Eventually, they elect, through democracy, the system of the West that was implemented and forced upon them. They elected a good guy. When I say good guy, I don't mean like a good believer or practitioner of the religion of Islam. I just mean somebody who wanted to do some good for the people. And so he decides that he's going to nationalize the oil. Okay? You know this guy, right?
It's Muhammad Mossadegh.
Why don't you tell us real quick the story?
So yeah, he was elected in power, and he saw how the British were making profit of the Iranian oil, and he thought to himself, it's the Iranians' oils, and we should profit from it. So he nationalized all the oil, and of course that made the British and the Americans upset, or the British then asked America to come in to help them to overthrow Mossadegh, and so the Americans did. And then they put in place the young Shah back then, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, because they thought that he's young, they can control him, and they can take all the oil back and profit from Iran. And so, Muhammad Reza Pahlavi took over. He started by the teachings of the Brits and the Americans to westernize Iran, and he started really a tyrannical rule. He put in the Sawak, which they were imprisoning, torturing anybody who would go against him. With the help of the CIA, he built the Sawak, and so slowly but surely the Islamic scholars started to rise against him, because they didn't like the westernization of Iran. They didn't like what he was doing in Iran, the tyrannical rule, and the people also helped him because they saw all the tyranny from him, and so it led to the revolution in 1979 by Khomeini.
So basically, Reza, this Shah, comes into power, Pahlavi, and he's basically killing people, and he's stealing their resources and their wealth, and he's living lavishly, and he's conducting and throwing the greatest parties in the history of Iran, and the likes that no other foreign leader or ruler or king is able to throw. He's having his lunches flown out from Paris by jet, just so you can have a lunch. Imagine like the amount of money spent for the jet to fly from Iran all the way to Europe to get his little lunch and bring it back to him. That's crazy.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, there were stories, and even in a particular movie with Ben Affleck, there's a reference in the beginning of it to the fact that his wife was taking baths in milk, right? While the very people of Iran were basically being tormented and starving to death. And so that led eventually to this revolution in which Khomeini and his group of clerics or scholars, along with the support of the youth, they lead an uprising, a revolution. They overthrow the Shah, and they take over the U.S. Embassy, and basically they establish in April of 1979 the so-called Islamic Republic of Iran. The reasons why they supported Khomeini is because he was the one who managed to successfully end 2,500 years of non-Islamic rule. And they saw him as a fulfillment of prophecy. They saw him as a forerunner to Imam Mahdí. The majority of the Iranian people at that time were Shia. They were followers of the religion of Shia Islam. They were believers that nobody has the right to rule except for Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and that right was stripped from them a long time ago. And so they saw Khomeini as somebody who was coming to pave the way, topple the tyrant, and establish the throne for Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, who's going to come and then establish a divine just state over all of the world. Okay? So they saw themselves really as playing a part or partaking in a role in the events of the end times that were prophesied by the Prophet Muhammad and his household 1,000+ years ago. Okay? It's a very special time.
Yeah.
They thought to themselves. And the clerics, they were very deceptive. They were like wolves and foxes. They, having had knowledge of the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, they began to take narrations from the books of hadiths, and they would apply it to themselves. And they would feed it through their outlets, through their printing press, in the newspapers, in the booklets, in the members, in the mosques, on the tongues of the scholars. They would have the scholars say things along the lines of, do you know that there's a hadith from the Ahl Bayt alayhim salam that speaks about a man that is from us that will rise and come? Oh, Khomeini also, he rose from Qom. Maybe he's that man in this narration. And so they would yatagarra'u, they would dare, they would be bold enough to transgress against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and take these narrations and apply them to themselves.
So they were actually doing that. They were feeding this myth that these are holy men.
They made out of themselves mythological beings. They made out of themselves gods. They coined phrases and named themselves Ayatollah. Ayatollah is a very problematic term, by the way, because it's a term that is not applicable to anybody except for Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, right? The infallible. Ayatollah. And they called Khomeini Ayatollah al-Uzma. Ayatollah means the sign of God. Ayatollah al-Uzma means the greatest sign of God. They turned him and his being, his identity, they made him into a miracle. They made him into a legend. It's like they made him into the Prince of the Believers. They said it without saying it. They turned him into the 13th Imam. Yeah. They made him something as great as the splitting of the sea by Moses. They turned him into something like the return of the sun by Joshua, right? Or the splitting of the moon by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They made him like the living Quran, and they made adherence to him and following him and supporting him obligatory. Something that if they don't have the Wiláya of the Faqíh, they invented this new thing called the Wiláya, or the authority of the jurisprudent, right? Which basically means what? It basically means, in simple terms, for our viewers, if you don't believe in Khomeini and if you don't have allegiance in your neck to him, basically if you don't have more allegiance to Khomeini than you do to the government of your own country, then basically what that means is that you are a kafir, your prayers are not accepted, your fasting is not accepted, and you're going to go to hellfire. And so it was a major fitna, major deception. They built a whole religion that was focused around the scholars, this guy, and they played on his name, Ruh Allah al-Khomeini, the spirit of God al-Khomeini. Okay, Ayatollah al-Azman, and they gave titles to all of their little clerics, the ones that were the close, the Hashia, the people that were like the close,
the archangels.
They gave them like special names, like Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam. They give this to the scholars. These are some of their titles, depending on where you are. You might be an Ayatollah. That's like the highest level. Okay, is being an Ayatollah, but lower levels is like Hujjat al-Islam. Shaykh al-Islam, the proof of Islam, or the Sheikh of Islam, the elder of all of Islam. So these are the titles that they gave themselves, and by these methods they deceived the people, and they transgressed even further, and they basically began to export their revolution and try to influence the Arab countries, to want to have all of their allegiance towards Iran. And they managed to do so actually in many of the countries like Syria and especially in Iraq and Lebanon, and they established the Hezbollah over there, this militia that's really like the shadow government that's ruling behind the scenes, that anything else doesn't really have real power. It's really Hezbollah that was over there for so many years that had the power, and their total allegiance was to Iran. It had nothing to do with Lebanon. This was an Iranian army, that existed in Lebanon, and the same thing is taking place in Iraq to this very day. You have many different militias in Iraq that are operating, that basically their allegiance goes back to the supreme leader of Iran.
Nasrallah would mention it in every speech of his.
Yeah, he would call him the supreme leader.
Yeah, so the scholars, they had convinced people, and now there's this mass hysteria in Iran that Imam Mahdí is coming, and that these are the people who will bring.
Yeah, so basically they start applying, they transgress even further, and they start applying prophecies that exist in the hadith of the Ahl Bayt to people that are like extremely loyal to them. So they take a person like Hassan Nasrallah, and they want to ensure that the Shia are supporting him and following him in his country. And so they begin to print out booklets. I've seen these booklets. I have copies of them, actually, that are openly stating that Hassan Nasrallah is the Yemeni. He's the fulfillment of the character of the Yemeni. And they would actually make up hadiths. They would make up hadiths, and they would summarize it and say, like, in the hadiths, it says that one of the names of the Yemeni is Nasrallah, or he'll have, these are the signs of the Yemeni. He'll have a yellow banner, even though it doesn't really say that they'll have, that it's the Yemeni that has the yellow banner. Like, you have hadiths that say that there's an army that moves at some point that has yellow banners, but it's not really clear if they're good or bad. And then it has the character of the Yemeni. They're just combining, they're collapsing narrations on each other in order to basically deceive the masses that are not really educated, that don't go that deep into the narrations, or are unable to know the truth for themselves. And the scholars are obviously part of the conspiracy, and they support their leader, and they consider the word of Chomejního to be divine. And so they really deceived the Shia world, hundreds of millions of people. They deceived them into actually thinking or considering the possibility that Hassan Nasrallah is the promised Yemeni, the one who is a forerunner to Imam Mahdí, the one that the narrations state that whoever does not support him is of the people of hellfire. You know, and Hassan Nasrallah doesn't deny this. He doesn't stop this. The scholars don't stop this. They're actually letting the lie propagate. They also took the character of the Khorasani, because it says that there will be three that will rise in one day right after another, and it will be the Khorasani and the Sufyani and the Yemeni, right? And they say that the Sufyani is bad and the Yemeni is good, all right? And these are all precursors or forerunners to the Mahdi. And then they say, and the Khorasani is good too. Yeah. And so they say the Khorasani was Chomejního. Okay.
Yeah.
And so people are in a state of shock right now. The Shia are in a state of shock because now they've lost their Khorasani, they've lost their Yemeni. The Yemeni and the Khorasani have died.
And the Mahdi never came.
And the Mahdi never came. Yeah, and now they're talking about having a little Saqifa in which there's three people that are going to elect the new Grand Ayatollah. They've been humiliated in front of the entire world. They were projecting themselves as having super divinely enforced strength, and now they don't have any strength whatsoever. And so people are sad, but they're also becoming disillusioned.
So many people fell for it too.
Yeah, so many people fell for it. So many poor, good people actually fell for it. But the crazy twist is that Imam Mahdí actually ended up 20 years after the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran, contacting them in 1999. So they're established in 1979. Imam Mahdí actually contacts them in 1999. And this is something that I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of. He sends forward a messenger, Ahmed al-Hassan. Okay? Basically what happens is that Ahmed al-Hassan, at this point, he is asleep in bed, and he has a dream. And in the dream, he sees Imam al-Mahdi. And Imam al-Mahdi tells him, I want you to meet me at this particular mausoleum. He wakes up from his dream, and he considers it just to be a dream. He doesn't act on it. He goes back to sleep. He has the same dream again. Okay? He says, no, obviously, this is a divine command. I must go. He's not somebody who's particularly religious. He's not somebody who ever thought that he would play an important role in this. He's somebody who actually studied and graduated to become an engineer. Normal person from Basra, Iraq. Normal youth. He ends up going in the middle of the night to the mausoleum, and lo and behold, he finds the man there at the mausoleum waiting for him that looks precisely like the man that he saw in his dream. The man identifies himself as Imam al-Mahdi. He confirms the dream, and they begin to have a conversation. and the mission of Imam Ahmed al-Hassan begins. And Imam al-Mahdi instructs Ahmed al-Hassan to go out to the people and to declare himself as a successor, as a messenger of Imam al-Mahdi. And he sends them forth proclaiming himself to be Ahmed in the will of the Prophet Muhammad. Because the Prophet Muhammad said on his deathbed, give me a paper and pen and I'll write something down for you that if you follow it, you'll never go astray. So here's a divine promise to the Muslims, so that if they follow this will, they'll never go astray. So if Ahmed al-Hassan is not from God and he claims the will, it's upon God to protect the will by eliminating Ahmed al-Hassan. And this is precisely what the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt state. They state that whoever claims it and is claiming it falsely is going to be killed. And so he sends him forth proclaiming the will. And he goes and he says, here's the letter of appointment. Here's my name in the will. I met Imam al-Mahdi. Imam al-Mahdi is sending me forth as a messenger, and his da'wah begins. And he begins his da'wah in the same manner that the public da'wah of Rasulullah began. The Prophet Muhammad it's very famous, all Muslims know, that in the beginning of his da'wah, he wrote actually letters to foreign leaders, informing them that he had been sent by God and asking them to support and believe in him. Okay? Same thing happened. Imam Ahmed al-Hassan, and these letters were published previously. He wrote letters to many different world leaders. The most important of them, the first of them, was the Islamic Republic of Iran. Chomejního received a letter from Ahmed al-Hassan requesting an audience with him and identifying himself as a messenger from the 12th Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hassan al-Askari alayhi salam. Obviously, he was met not just with silence, not just with them ignoring him, but they actually began leading a vicious campaign, just like the Bani al-Abbas did before with the Imams from the Ahlul Bayt, to eliminate and assassinate Ahmed al-Hassan and issue fatwas against Ahmed al-Hassan. And the scholars in Iraq were all activated, because many of the scholars in Iraq, their loyalty is to Iran. And so all of a sudden, the scholars started fighting against Ahmed al-Hassan, declaring his blood halal, all right, and pushing these militias and these fanatics to go out and basically eliminate him. Okay? So obviously they weren't interested in anything that has to do with Imam al-Mahdi. They only say that stuff for the cameras or for the people, so that the people support them, but they don't actually believe it, you know? And so they did get a messenger. They got a messenger in 1999 who continuously, for the years after that, all the way up until 2007, repeatedly proclaimed his message and called the people to the supremacy of God and raised the banner of Rasulullah. There are narrations that state that the Mahdi raises a banner, and in his banner is written al-Bay'adillah. There's no point of these narrations being there if anybody's just going to come and try to fulfill it. And nobody has fulfilled that except for two people. One is Ahmed al-Hassan, and the second is his successor, who he handed the banner to, and that is myself. And so he came with all of the evidence. He came with knowledge. He called them towards the supremacy of God. He said to them, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? You guys are behaving like Sunnis. The whole message of Karbala, the whole reason why Imam al-Hussein went out and stood against the Bani Umayyah, the whole reason why him and his family died, the whole basis of our religion for the past 1400 years, our whole problem with the rest of the Muslim nation has been this idea that it's haram to choose your own ruler. You don't have the ability to choose your own leader. Anybody who chooses their own leader is ultimately going against the will of the Prophet Muhammad on his deathbed. They're going against Ghadir Khum. They're betraying Muhammad and the family of Muhammad alayhi salam. There's no difference between them and the Jews and the Christians and the Hindus and the Buddhists and anybody else who's a non-Muslim, because they're also not listening to the Prophet Muhammad or not abiding by his. What's the difference between you and them? Yes. You guys are actually Sunnis, who followed the modern day Abu Bakr's and Omar's. How could you, as the Islamic Republic of Iran, sanction the democratic elections that are taking place in Iraq? Mm-hmm. How could you guys not speak out against Sistani, who basically issued fatwas that people have to go out and participate in elections? What does this even mean? Like, how can you guys deceive us? How can they proclaim themselves on the one hand to have Imam Mahdí with him, but on the other hand, they're just like electing and participating in democracy? There's no difference between Iraq, Iran, the behavior of the Shias, and any other country in the world. Mm-hmm. And so Ahmed al-Hassan continuously preached to them the dangers of voting elections, and he called it the second Saqifa. And he pointed out in narrations from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam how the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa said that Ali ibn Abi Talib and his children would be betrayed twice, that there would be these two great conspiracies. Mm-hmm. One that would be after my death to strip away the rights of my daughter and my successor, Ali ibn Abi Talib and Fatima az-Zahra, which is referring to the first Saqifa, and then there would be a second Saqifa in the end times, in which the Muslims, all of them, would participate in betraying the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam by choosing other rulers. And when this happened, when the elections took place in Iraq, when the Shia, the final group of Muslims that had been clean for the most part throughout history from betraying the Prophet and his family, they've abstained from participating in elections and all of this, even though obviously there's always traitors in every day and age, and you have pictures of various Shia scholars kissing the hands of the Shah and things like this. But I'm just saying, like, as a belief, as an aqidah, as a principle, right? But now, like, khalas, they had, it's like the whole Hawza and all of the Majaz and all the scholars and everybody was like pro-democracy, elections, supporting. They just replaced the imams with other people. And you see them in the streets. You see them in the streets crying now, calling Chomejního their imam. My imam's lost, etc. They made even Chomejního an additional imam that had no authority from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they considered them to be kind of like religious heads that are on the side, but their true aim, the true goal is to actually participate in elections and democracy. And they participated. They went out in the streets and they would just vote for their presidents, and they would vote for their prime ministers, and they would engage in American democracy in Iraq. And so it became clear to everybody that actually they don't have Imam Mahdí alayhi salam with them. And so what's taking place right now, the collapse of the Islamic Republic of Iran that so many people are mourning, it's something that people shouldn't mourn over at all. Mm-hmm. They should actually celebrate. Mm-hmm. Not celebrate because of their love or support for Israel or the United States. It has nothing to do with that. This idea that they're trying to project out there that there's people in the streets waving Israeli flags and are welcoming that's a small minority. That's not the reality. The reality of the Muslim world, they hate Israel, and they hate Israel a lot worse today than they did a couple of years ago due to what's taken place in Gaza. And they don't like the United States at all, when they don't like what's taking place at the hands of Trump, and they see him as a puppet for Israel. That's the fact. You got some people that are atheists or non-believers, but the majority of the Iranian people do not support Israel and the United States. That's a fact. They don't necessarily support the mullahs either, the sheikhs or the regime that's in place, but this is not the way that they wished that it would have happened, that they wish that it would have happened with their own hands, with them carving their own future and their own destiny. But they should be happy that this regime of imposters that stole the rights of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad are finally gone. It's like they're being like a great magician who had cast a spell over a whole group of people. At least the magician's gone now. You know what I mean? Now he's assassinated by the Romans. He's assassinated by the Jews. It doesn't really matter. It's not about that. And it's not about like, oh, since he was assassinated by the Americans, then let's be pro-American. It's not about that. What the fact of the matter is that they were bad people and that they're gone and they were taken out by other bad people. That's fine. The field has been cleared. It's been cleared for the people to see where Imam Mahdí really is. This is all part of the paving the way for the true Mahdi.